Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
And hello again, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of TITV, brought to you by, as mentioned at the top, Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Boy, they do some great work for our community. Alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com, I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris. And before we get to the show, I know you pretty well, so I think that this burnt orange shirt is being worn by design, I bet. I bet you knew what you were doing when you put that on.
All our friends in Texas that watch this show, Gary, I'm just, for their moral victory, I'm honoring them with burnt orange.
Yeah, that's where we're at now. I don't know if this says a lot about Texas or Alabama, but just nearly beating Alabama now was a great day for Texas, even though they didn't win the game. But it was a victory for the Crimson Tide. Still, though, Rodney, I guess you could say it was costly in one respect. The Crimson Tide is no longer number one in the Associated Press Top 25 poll as Georgia moved ahead of the Crimson Tide, but the Tide is still undefeated, and just barely. Alabama got past Texas in a close, hotly contested game. We're literally hot on that field. They said it was like 115 degrees Saturday afternoon in Austin, 20-19. Both teams swapped field goals. Then Jace McClellan busted one off for 81 yards. And it was 10-3, and you're thinking, it's going to be easy for Bama. But Texas would not go away, even after Quinn Ewers, their young quarterback, got drilled by Dallas Turner and had to leave the game with a shoulder situation. They just kept on coming. Their defense was about as good as I've seen a Texas defense in a long time. Alabama was behind 16-10, and then great play by Young to Jahmyr Gibbs at 17-16. But Texas, their kicker's last name was Auburn, by the way, hit a 49-yard field goal, and then Bryce Young worked his magic. Cornerback came free, no problem, 20-plus yards there, and that sets up Will Reichert, who is automatic. 33 yards. The Tide wins it 20-19. Oh, just barely. Afterwards, Bryce Young talked about, hey, you got to battle through, learn from the frustration, and then get ready to move on to the next one.
I don't think we had any frustration. We're obviously competitors. When we don't have success, it's not the ideal. It's not the ideal scenario. But we understand through what Coach Saban has taught us, what will be, and everyone in the building teaches us is, we got to play the next play. Coach Saban's saying that all the time. So, we go back to the sideline. Obviously, no one's happy. We don't want to not have success, but it's not a frustration thing. We go back to the sideline. We analyze what we did wrong, what we didn't do, how we didn't execute. We move on to the next play.
And I don't think he does get frustrated. I still remember him laughing down at Auburn last year before that huge fourth down play. He keeps his cool. I'm not sure we could say that for all of his teammates. I did sense some frustration, particularly with some of the players on Alabama's defense. But, Rodney, let's start with the biggest negative that I have is 15 penalties for 100 yards, 12 in the first half. That's not Alabama football. 100 yards, that's an entire football field worth of penalties. I don't care who you're playing. You get penalized that much, and some of them were huge penalties. It kept drives going for Texas and ended drives for Alabama. That's rare that you get penalized that often and win the football game.
Well, I think obviously that's the most penalties Alabama's incurred in Nick Saban's tenure here in a game. And, Gary, listen, we talked about this, and I said it many times. I thought Alabama going on the road would be much more mature this time. After last year when they went on the road to Florida, they struggled. Went on the road at Texas A&M, they lost. The Auburn game, we saw how that came out. But, again, we thought the maturity, the leadership on this team would be a little bit different, heading into this game in Austin. And, you saw the undisciplined, lack of focus, some of the similar things that they incurred last year on the roads. Those things cropped up in this game. But, again, the important thing is, let's not forget, Alabama found a way in the fourth quarter to take the game over. Bryce Young in that fourth quarter was 15 of 19. Alabama pretty much controlled from maybe 12 minutes on, last 12 minutes of the game.
And another issue for Alabama, we talked a lot about the fact that Mechie and Jamison Williams and Slade Bolden all moved on to the NFL. The wide receivers looked great in that first game against Utah State. Had some issues on Saturday. Had some issues with drops, again. Had issues with not recognizing zone coverage, not sitting down when they needed to, not being able to get open against man coverage. As you mentioned, Bryce just took it over in the fourth quarter. But those first three quarters, Alabama struggled in the passing game. And outside of the 81-yard run by McClellan, which you can't take away. It counts, I get it, but they struggled in the run game. Really, for 3 quarters, they just flat out struggled on offense all the way around.
Yeah, they did. Again, it was very similar to the Auburn game, but I thought when Alabama went more tempo in the fourth quarter, started throwing a lot of quick routes, quick passes, I thought every aspect certainly played better. I thought the offensive line protected a little bit better, obviously. I thought, Bryce Young got the ball out very quickly. The receivers made some big plays, and I thought just what are they going to do moving forward, though, Gary? Because as you look at this Alabama offense, you just wonder, what is the identity going to become? They've got to establish a strong running game. They've got some outstanding running backs. I get it. The offensive line is really a work in progress. I think there's, some inexperience there, but, they've got to somehow develop an identity for this offense.
Defensively, and some big penalties. Will Anderson, I think, had 4 penalties. A couple of times he lined up off sides. He got a bad personal foul when he shoved the guy in the back after he had been to the ground. He said he thought he was still in play. But at the end of the day, and I understand, Quinn Ewers was lighting him up. Let's be honest, he was. But Hudson Card came in and played well. At the end of the day, Alabama gave up 19 points. And they held Bijan Robinson to 57 rushing yards on 21 attempts. So there were some good things on defense. Again, a lot of penalties, some pass interference penalties. Texas had some success in the passing game. But when you go on the road and you hold a Power 5 team to 19 points, that's not all bad.
It's not. And listen, first of all, those first 2 series with Quinn Ewers, again, they're on the script. He got some, I guess you could term it easy one-on-one throws, Gary. You got to make those throws. He did in a lot of those instances. So, yeah, he was impressive. Now, Hudson Card came in the game. A lot of people say, well, he's a backup. He was a starter last year.
And he was almost a starter this year.
He was almost a starter this year. It was a real close battle. I know I talked to some people from Texas, inside that Texas football building yesterday, and they thought that there's not a lot of difference between Quinn Ewers and Hudson Card as far as quarterbacks go. So I think Alabama did an outstanding job defensively in a lot of respects. And, that last possession that Texas had they gotten the first down there at 3rd and 3, game's over.
Could ran it down, kicked the field goal.
Not only did Will Anderson make a big play on that sack, but Justin Aboybe got his hands up and kind of distracted Card's throwing lane, and that was big because he had a guy open.
Huge play in the game. All right, now it's time for Coach Talk. Nick Saban pointed out this week that a couple of teams that were favored to win their games by more than 20 points, even though he didn't say them by name, he was talking about Texas A&M and Notre Dame, they didn't win their games. So what does being a 20-point plus favorite mean? Well, you still got to go play the games. And Coach Saban said, so being a big favorite evidently doesn't mean a lot.
What does it mean to be favored by 21 points? Well, there were 2 teams that I know of, maybe more, I don't know, that were favored by about the same amount that actually got beat. So I guess it doesn't mean anything. And that's why we have to play the games. So it's important for players to learn that they have to focus and prepare for every team and every opponent so that they can go out there and play to the best of their ability. Because sometimes even when you win, you can lose.
Obviously, he's right. And again, something on the point spreads. Las Vegas oddsmakers set these point spreads at a number where they're trying to get an equal amount of play on each side, and then they adjust it depending on where the money comes in. They're not necessarily saying that one team is X amount of points better than the other. They're not a game predictor. They're a gambling predictor. So I think that's one of the things that's really hurt college football is so many people see these spreads and they think, you're a 20-something point favorite that you just automatically ought to be able to win the game easily. Rodney, that isn't the case. And people need to wake up to that. You keep believing that, and you're going to have a lot of disappointing days.
We said last week, I know I said it repeatedly, and again, I picked Alabama to win it by 45-24, so that's 21-point differential. But we knew that Texas was a talented team. You're not going to recruit the state of Texas and be the University of Texas and not have outstanding players. They've got some really talented, skilled players. A lot of those guys be starting here at Alabama, quite honestly. So we knew that they were a talented football team. And guess what? Look, I followed Texas football for 50 years, Gary. I don't think I've ever seen a crowd in Austin, Texas, that raucous of a crowd. It was because of Alabama. I mean, if they win that game, that certainly makes their program.
Well, I said it this week on my radio show. I don't care what happens going forward. But that day, in that environment, Texas played like a top 10 team.
They did.
You can't take that away from them. All right, Alabama place kicker Will Reichert has been selected as the SEC Special Teams Player of the Week. He earned it. In addition to his game-winning 33-yard field goal, he added another field goal from 52 yards, tied his career long. He also was 2 for 2 on PATs for a total of 8 points, and he had 5 kickoffs with 3 touchbacks against the Longhorns. Ronnie, we have seen years where Alabama clearly had the best team in the country, and they lost a game or two because they didn't have a kicker. That's not the case this year.
Man, he has been money. I tell you, Gary, you said he was automatic. Think back to that Iron Bowl, the kick that he had in overtime, and this was very similar. I mean, and they called timeout on the first one.
Yeah, 2 years ago he didn't miss a kick. Point after or a field goal. That's phenomenal. Well, still to come on TITV, Alabama men's golf breaks out in its season opening tournament and may have raised expectations for the season in the process. Plus, we'll take a look back at Bama football's mixed history against this week's opponent, Louisiana Monroe. 2006, 2015, it went well. 2007, not so much. And later on, we'll be getting your phone calls, emails, and tweets. As always, the number 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. Go ahead and call in now, and we'll be ready for you here in just a little bit. TITV, we'll come back right after this. ULM week certainly brings mixed emotions for Bama fans. Bama handled the Warhawks in 2006, but then on November 19, 2007, Nick Saban's first season, it was a stunner. Bama had 21 first-half points, did not score in the second half, or 14 first-half points, I should say, did not score in the second half, and ULM won the game. I know that Alabama team turned out to be kind of average, textbook scandal and depth issues, but still, that was a shocker. That was the last time Alabama lost a non-conference regular season game. Alabama's won 53 straight since, a streak that barely survived last Saturday's trip to Austin. Of course, it was a different story in 2015 as well. Alabama's defense smothered the Warhawks in a 34-0 win. ULM didn't get its first down until midway through the second quarter. That 15 defense was pretty good. And they finished with 9 yards rushing for the entire game. Alabama's defense finished with 6 sacks and 2 interceptions in that shutout. Welcome back to TITV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism Sports. Alongside Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Well, even after struggling against the Texas Longhorns, Tide fans probably expect Saturday's game to be a lot more resembling 2015 than 2007. But you never know. Again, as Coach Saban said, that's why you play them. So far this season, Louisiana Monroe, or ULM as they like to be referred, 1-1. They lost their season opener to Texas in Austin 52-10, but bounced back to beat Nicholls State, an in-state opponent. They won that game at home 35-7. Alabama's a 49-50 point favorite, and this will be the first time the Warhawks have been back at Bryant-Denny since 2015. Kickoff is at 3 p.m. on the SEC Network. Rodney, I will say this. Terry Bowden is their coach. He's coached at the highest level, Auburn in the SEC. Got a lot of experience around a lot of different programs. They're going to be well coached, and they're going to have discipline and pretty good players. Clearly, I think for Alabama, this game is about cleaning up the mistakes, the penalties, making sure that assignment-wise, you're sound on defense. Coverage-wise, there's some issues against Texas. I guess what I'm saying is it's more about Alabama. I hate to call it a tune-up, but in some degree it is. And then you get Vanderbilt the next weekend for your SEC opener at home. Then you go to Fayetteville to play Arkansas. So these next 2 games, I think, are crucial to get ready to go to Arkansas here in a few weeks.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it's mental, too. I think discipline, focus, all of these things. I don't care who you're playing. I mean, this Alabama team certainly has to get that focus in this game. Because like you mentioned, a couple of weeks, they're going to Arkansas. They've got a couple of games here that they really have to get their minds right. So, and you mentioned, ULM, Terry Bowden. They've done a really good job there. Chandler Rogers is their quarterback.
Athlete.
He's really athletic, but he can throw the ball, too. He's 20 of 25 last week for 243 yards, had a couple of touchdown throws. He's got, as you said, he spreads the ball around. They had 10 different receivers in this last game.
I think it's important that Alabama do to the Warhawks exactly what they did to the Utah State Aggies. Get on top of them early. Take any thoughts out of their minds that this is going to be a competitive game, and get some younger players in there too, and get back to Alabama football on Saturday. All right, moving on. Alabama women's soccer is back in action this Thursday, and this time the Crimson Tide soccer team is playing one of the biggest games in the history of the program. It's a ranked-on-ranked matchup. Alabama's number 18 in the country. They've earned that with wins over Clemson and Brigham Young. They're 6-1, and their last win was a easy one on Sunday night over North Alabama. They are going to take on South Carolina, who is number 4 in the country. So this is going to be a big-time SEC soccer matchup. and one that should have a lot of fans. This Alabama soccer team under Wes Hart, they have the look of a postseason team this year, so keep that in mind. Get out there and watch them on Thursday night. And Alabama men's golfer Kennan Claycomb claimed medalist honors to lead the Alabama men's golf team to its first team championship in 2 years as it captured the Rod Myers Invitational on Saturday afternoon in Durham, North Carolina. This was a loaded field. Claycomb was unbelievable leading the Crimson Tide. They had a team total of 13 under par, 11 strokes better than the next closest team. They went 1-2-3. Claycomb finished first. Thomas Ponder and Nick Dunlap were second and third. This is what Coach Jay Sewell has been wanting, to get back to playing Alabama golf, and they look great. All right, when we come back, we're going to get to phone calls, emails, and tweets right here on TITV. There's the number again, 205-348-9882. Go ahead and give us a call. We're going to keep rocking on a Tuesday night in T-Town. Stay with us. And we're back here on TITV with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. Of course, you know who you are, and we're glad that you're with us tonight. All right, we're going to get to some phone calls. We've got a couple calls lined up. Going to start off with Sammy, our good pal up there in Walker County. Hey, Sammy, how are you? Welcome into the program.
Thanks, Gary and Rodney. Great job, guys. My MVP for the game, guys, has to be Reichard because I'm so proud of that guy, how he's kicking. He's just doing great. And he was one of the few Alabama players, think about it, that played as good from the opening snap to the end of the game. He's just great, and he played great against Utah State. Hey, I think Jalen Moody made a few good plays, too, out of linebacker. Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you, Sammy. Yeah, I'm with you on Reichard. I think he and Bryce Young are co-MVPs because Bryce Young, let me tell you something, Reichard was phenomenal. Bryce Young was phenomenal. He took that game over in the fourth quarter. Hey, I'm glad Sammy mentioned Jalen Moody, though, because this is a guy, Rodney, he very easily could be at Texas.
That's right.
He went into the portal, I think, with the idea of transferring to Austin to play for Texas, and Alabama, Nick Saban talked him out of it. Two games, I'm not sure he hasn't been the most consistent performer on that defense. He has been good.
Yeah, you know, we talked about him, Gary, as a guy that was replacing Christian Harris. And, you know, I remember, 2020, first play of the Arkansas game, Christian Harris goes out, Jalen Moody comes in, makes a bunch of plays, looked really good. So when he's got his opportunities in the last few years, he's performed and he's doing really, really well. And I tell you, Sammy mentioned him. I also thought Terry and Arnold did a good job coming off the bench.
I thought he was the best corner in that game for Alabama. I really do. All right, let's get down to Moundville and talk with Dale. Hey, Dale, how are you?
Hey, fellas, how y'all doing? I'm happy with the win over Texas and everything, but I don't see a John Mechie or a Jameis Williams on this team, and I just think if we don't find a running game, that this team is going to get Bryce Young hit quite a bit, and they could lose 2 or 3 SEC games. Also, I don't see why they don't bring Monroe in on the 4th and inches and do a quarterback sneak.
All right, thank you, Dale. All right, first of all, in the running game, it's got to get better. Some of that's on the backs, too. It's not on the offensive line. You got to hit the hole, and you got to hit it with authority, and you got to hit the right hole. I think in that game, the backs at times didn't do what they were supposed to do. As far as the receivers, now listen, man, they got 3 wide receivers out, including JoJo Earl, who had a phenomenal fall camp until he got hurt. The wide receiver transfer from Louisville.
Tyler
Harrell, who's very fast, a 4.2 guy. So I think they're going to get some more help at the wide receiver. Plus, those young guys, they're going to get experience and they're going to get better. I think they're going to be okay there.
I think if Aaron Anderson hadn't have been hurt, the true freshman, hurt his knee, a meniscus, he's back practicing. I think he's a guy that's a difference maker, could have probably been kind of in that Kobe Prentice role. He is really, really electric. He'll be back, too. So I think the wide receiver core, as you go along, will get better.
All right, we'll get to an email when we come back on the other side of this break. This is Tider Insider TV. It's time for our email question of the day, brought to you by KDM Service Corporation, serving your family like our family. This is from Jamie in Haleyville. What's happened to wide receiver Tyler Harrell? We mentioned him earlier. Hopefully, Rodney, he'll be back soon.
Yeah, he's had a little bit of a sprained foot, Gary. Hopefully, he'll be back by early October, maybe by the Arkansas game.
All right, we're going to try to squeeze in one more phone call. Jeff is with us from Carbon Hill. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Rodney. The first-time caller. I just wanted to make a comment about the game. You know, as much struggle as we had during the game, when push came to shove, the offense and defense stepped up and did what had to be done, and we got the win, and that's the most important thing. You know, to the Alabama fans that's become spoiled to all the blowout, no matter what, a win's a win. I just hang up and let y'all know, see what y'all think.
All right,
Roll
Jeff,
Tide
thank
Roll.
you. Yeah, Rodney, he's right. End of the day, listen, as bad as you feel, imagine how bad you would have felt if they'd lost the game. It would have been completely different. Completely.
Would have been.
You
Sure.
wouldn't have to worry about dropping down to number 2. You'd drop down to about number 12. So, yeah, at the end of the day, Rod, winning the game, that's the object.
Yeah, it is. Again, everything's still in front of Alabama. I think this team is a team that can really develop. Certainly Nick Saban thinks they've got a lot of good players.
All right, Jeff, thanks for that phone call. We got to get to the break. We'll come back and make our predictions for the game on Saturday afternoon between the Crimson Tide and the Warhawks next on a beautiful evening in Tuscaloosa. We'll be right back. Some tough news from the NFL for a couple of former Bama defensive linemen. Washington Commanders rookie defensive tackle Fedarian Mathis suffered a season-ending knee injury Sunday in the season-opening win over the Jaguars. And listen, they loved him and still love him up there in Washington. That's tough. Also, Deshaun Hand, who is now with the Titans, his season over after just 2 plays. Rodney, on his second snap, he tore a quad, and he's out for the season as well. Tough luck for those 2 former Bama defensive linemen. Of course, it seems like a lot of tough luck for Bama guys, but when you have that many guys in the NFL, you're going to have more injuries too. All right, Rodney, it's prediction time. Alabama and ULM.
Well, I don't have a lot to say about this one, Gary. I just hope Alabama comes out and plays disciplined, focused football. You want to see that, and I think it's really important in this game. I've got it 52-0.
Yeah, about the only difference, Rodney, is I think the Warhawks will score. I got it 55-10. I think that 49-50 point line's right in there, and I just think the Warhawks will get on the board, maybe even late in the fourth quarter. We'll find out on Saturday afternoon. Well, thank you for tuning in to TITV, presented by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Don't forget, if you missed any of tonight's show or you want to catch a replay, it comes on tonight, 10:30 after the news at 10, or find it anytime at WVUA23.com. Visit our website. It's great. We leave you tonight with highlights of former Alabama players during week 1 of the NFL season. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good night. We'll talk to you again next Tuesday on TITV.
Cooks to the near side. Mills looking for the end zone.